So this last fall, if you're with us, and many of you I know weren't, but we did this series this last fall called Help My Faith is Evolving. And part of the design of that series was to begin to try to speak honestly to the reality that while faith means holding on to God and holding on to certain things, it also invariably means changing. And sometimes that felt and feels oxymoronic. But what we spent the fall talking about is even looking at the text and seeing like faith evolves even in the text itself. And so it was our way of really moving towards year one of decade two. It was our one of trying to be honest with the faith process of here's where we're at and here's where we're not at and what does this look like. And my goal for that series was to provoke you to begin to put into words how has your faith evolved, whether that's inbounds or out of bounds, but just to begin, to be honest with that. And for me, that's what I did in that process. I didn't know it at the time, but I had to work through that to really go, okay, God, let's go after this for another 10 years of being a church together and serving people in these ways. But on the back half of that for me, and we did this in the series as well, was this process of going, okay, so if we allow how has our faith changed, then maybe it's also healthy to go, how has it absolutely not changed? I mean, if on the one hand, what we allow is sometimes you sit across from a mentor or a friend or somebody that you still have tremendous respect for, a parent, a pastor, a leader, and sometimes you just have to go, I'm not there anymore. How do we also honor that person by other ways going, and yet I still absolutely believe in this thing? And one of those things for us, for me rather, was this idea of generosity. I obviously live like we all do, I suppose, from a unique angle, and I get to watch people live out their lives of faith from a unique perspective. And one of the things that happened to me as I was working through that process was this realization of generosity, it wins. It matters. Like everybody wins, both the individual and those on the receiving end, when people make a decision to set aside some of their time, some of their energy, some of their resource, some of their budget for people and entities and organizations and individuals other than themselves. And so really what I want to do in this series, it's obviously a money series and everybody loves those, but really what I want to do is drill down on this idea of generosity. And I don't feel like it's my job to necessarily teach anything, but to remind, to reinvigorate, and just to shine a spotlight on what so many of you have already made a part of your life and journey. The week before last, my youngest and I got to go to Florida together, and my wife had this brilliant idea that when the boys were in middle school, I would take them on a trip. And so my oldest, we went to a Bronco game, and he paid half. And then my next one, we went to a Cardinal game, and he paid nothing. And then my third one, we went to Florida. So it stinks being the oldest, right? There's this progression that happens. But he wanted to go to Florida. The Cardinal spring training are there. He's really into tropical freshwater fish, I think is the way that you say that, and the vegetation. But of course, Florida is incredibly expensive to access from Helena, Montana. And so every time we'd kind of look at it, we were like, no, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that. And then over Thanksgiving, we were having Thanksgiving with some friends, and one of those friends started talking about how she had family, her sister actually, in southern Florida. And the Cardinals spring training is in Jupiter, Florida. And she made the comment like, well, my sister lives there. And it was one of those kind of in conversation, you could probably stay with them. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. But still, airplane tickets out of Helena are $2 million to go anywhere. And so then I had this idea a couple of weeks later where I realized I had to go to Portland for work for a class here a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, I wonder if it's cheaper to fly JR to Portland with me and then fly together to Florida from Portland than it is to fly from here. And the answer was it is. It was like $120 to fly from Portland to southern Florida, which will only make it hurt worse when you buy an airplane ticket out of Helena. So I called my friend and I was like, hey, so I figured out, maybe we could figure out a way to make flying affordable. You know, I hate to put you awkwardly on the spot, but if you think your sister might really be okay with that, then we'd take you up on that. And so she got back to us a few days later and said, yep, she's up for it. And so here we were 2 weeks ago, this next Tuesday. JR and I pulled up at about 8:30 at night in the pitch black, in our rental car to these people whom we had never met in person, their gated golf community. We pulled up to their house, started pulling luggage out of our car, and as we were getting out of the car, this woman and her husband came out the front door, and we kind of awkwardly shook. I mean, we never even met these people. They never met us. They took us to the room that we're going to be staying in. It was like, that was awesome. And then we hung out in the kitchen on Tuesday night, and she had made us dinner, and we talked. And then we had 3 days together, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And to be honest with you, by about halfway through the first day, JR and I were, I think, more excited to get back to their house and hang out with them for the evening than we were to go watch the Cardinals and look at bonsai trees and do the stuff that we were doing in South Florida. And on Friday night, they already had plans for Friday night, and you could tell they were really bummed about that. So Friday night, we didn't get to hang out with these people. And as she was leaving, she said, oh, hey, so here's the 4-letter, I guess it's a code for the country club. You guys could go eat there. Now, my friend, one of the things she said the day we left, she said, if they invite you to the country club, say yes. So I'm looking at this code, and JR we had already decided, like, hey, we're going to just probably go buy a pizza and come back, and they had a swimming pool in the backyard. So it was just incredible. And at the last minute, we thought, let's go check out the country club. So we went to the country club, and the place was packed. They had this beautiful, just a year-old restaurant and live music inside, and it was just packed. And so we're like, okay, let's go. And we went to leave, and I actually took a wrong turn when we went to leave, and then that kind of put us back to the same spot, and I was like, okay, let's go try this. So we walked up, and again, the place was still packed, and we walked around the side because Molly had given us a tour earlier in the week, and they had this beautiful pool, heated pool, palm trees. I mean, it was like paradise, and all these tables with umbrellas over them, and nobody was out there because it was 68 degrees and freezing. So everybody was inside. And so I walked up to the hostess, and I was like, and these are my exact words, I was like, hey, so we're pretty much noobs at this, but could we sit on the deck? And she goes, yeah. And I think there were about 4 people who asked us for our access code within the first 5 minutes. So clearly we gave away the fact that we were not from there. So we walk out to this table, this patio table. There's live music like 10 feet away. Everybody inside is wearing stocking caps and snow boots. We're sitting along this deck eating our pizza. I'm having a beer. He's having a Sprite. And there was this moment for me where I just looked at him and I said, hey, so JR, there's a lot that comes with growing up in the church and a pastor's house and all those different things. But I had this moment for me where I said, but I hope that when you're out of the house and you're trying to make sense of faith and you're trying to make sense of church and God and all those things, I hope one of the things that stands out to you are the incredible volume of generous people that our families uniquely got to meet because of what I do. And I just, it was 7th grade eyes. I felt like I got through to him. And I mean that genuinely. Like, for me, what I want to do in this series isn't teach new stuff. I have this unique seat to so many of your lives. And by the way, I don't look at who gives what. I'm not even talking necessarily about money per se, but just generosity. And so my goal here, I think when I did series like this 5 or 6 years ago, I think if I were being honest, it was about the reality that if we're going to exist as an organization in the next couple years, it'll be because people buy in with their budgets. And I suppose that's still true, but I can say this, I think with integrity, ultimately you get to judge over the next few weeks. But for me, it's really not about that. What I see is everything that this place happens because so many of you, in many cases somewhere other than Narrate, developed a generosity muscle where you came to believe in this thing called setting aside part of yourself and part of what you have for others, and you're better for it, and so are we. And my goal for this series, I think there's a few different groups of people that I have in mind, but one of them is those of you who that's you. And I think more than anything else, my goal is just to reinvigorate, re-energize, just validate the life that you signed up for, many of you decades ago. I actually have a friend who just finished his doctorate at Portland Seminary, and his dissertation was on how does Dave Ramsey's financial peace class impact people's charitable giving, or whatever category, whether that's to the animal shelter or to the local church, because there's some conversation, and I've been privy to it for years. I've had peers who have speculated for years that when someone signs up for Dave Ramsey's financial peace class, and if you're not familiar for that, Ramsey is this brilliant communicator and thinker. I really, really like him. Some people, his personality rubs the wrong way, and that's okay. But he's the best in the world at helping people just get sane with their money. If you're at this place where you don't even know how to create a budget or get out of credit card debt or put, the next time the wash machine breaks on something other than a credit card, like that's his wheelhouse. He has this class called Financial Peace. Actually, Chris and Bridget Rebo, who are back there in the tech booth, they've led that class for us for years. They're going to start another class next Sunday at 2 o'clock, so would love for you to get you connected to that. There's a sign-up sheet out there for that. But my friend, he wanted to ask the question, how does someone signing up for that class impact how much they give? And I talked to him here about a month ago. And so here's one of those, like, he had to go to school for 4 years and write papers. You get the answer in 2 minutes. I said, so what'd you learn? And the gist of his dissertation, and he spent time in Nashville with Dave Ramsey. He's done all kinds of research. He comes from a financial background before he was in the church world. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy when it comes to money and finance. He helped save Rocky from going bankrupt years ago in Billings. He said, here it's really this simple, Adam. For the first 2 years, after someone signs up for FPU, for the first 2 years, their giving drops below what it was when they started. And I think probably we can all make assumptions as to why that's the case, because there's this energy going to debt and all those different things. And he's not calling that good or bad, just saying that's what his research said. And then in year 3, it goes above where it was before they started, and it stays above where it was when they started for 2 years. So 1 and 2 below, years 3 and 4 above. But this was the unique part of his research, I thought. But in year 5, he said, it drops back down below what it was before they started, unless they retake the class. So maybe you want to go, as an alum, retake the class. Unless they read something, they do something, they participate in a series, they do something like, frankly, I'm hoping that we can do for the next few weeks, that just reinvigorates them, not so much around the how, but the why. And I think, quite frankly, that's one of my goals for this series, is for many of you that this would just re-energize that muscle in your life as it relates to your time and your talents and your giving. And if you're like, you're just trying to get my money, then don't give it here. Just whatever that looks like in your life, that's my goal for this. The other group of you, I think, and I think that's what the series video really tried to capture, and man, that was fun trying to figure that one out. But is this idea, is it's for those of you who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And if you're not there, chances are you've been there at some point in your life. But just for those of you who have this realization that you feel broke, but you're actually, like, you're broke, but you have an income. And there's this tension that happens, and I think especially in our consumer-driven, affluent culture, my hope is that for those of you that are sick and tired of being in debt, you're sick and tired of feeling broke and working as hard as you work, for those of you who are looking for some kind of sanity as it relates to creating a budget or something along those lines, that we can help you with that. I think maybe the best way would be to sign up for that class, but if you're not ready for that, just form a relationship. It's going to take a relationship. I'm so proud of the staff right now. I can say with absolute confidence that all 7 people on staff right now, they're living this. And so maybe having lunch or coffee with one of them, and if that's uncomfortable, maybe they can help you network with some of the great people in this room. But if you're someone that's like, it's March and you're still paying off Christmas credit cards, and you're sick of doing that, I'm not trying to judge you. I'm just trying to say if you're sick of it, I think we can help with that. And the third group is maybe for those of you who you're just intrigued. One of the privileges we have every fall is baptizing people, and the way we like to say it is if somewhere back there you started following Jesus, whether that was 6 months ago or 6 years ago, but for those of you you're connected, you're back at church, you're at church for the first time, you're loving following Jesus, and then the bucket comes by and you're just like, I just don't get that. And I think that's fair. I mean, that there's nothing else in our culture, anything like what churches do when they pass an offering bucket. And so if you're intrigued by the financial generosity, work it into your budget thing, but don't have a clue where to start, I'm really hoping that we can help you with that. And again, that may take a relationship. We're going to do something the last week of the month that I think will be an absolute blast, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I think that will help, and I promise it won't involve embarrassing or putting a spotlight on you. So that's ultimately what we're going to do in this series. I think to get started, maybe we do this. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you not to respond, but I just want to ask the question, and then we'll come back to it. And the question is this: how many of you, at some point, at different seasons, how many of you feel financial pressure? Now, that could be financial pressure because you're 13 and you want an iPhone and you don't know where you're going to get the money. That could be financial pressure because you're 60 and you just got your health insurance bill and you don't understand how you're going to pay for that. That could be financial pressure because you're about to graduate and suddenly the cost of a loaf of bread is striking you. That could be financial pressure because you have credit card debt, or financial pressure because you've got a car loan, or financial pressure because your business isn't doing great. But how many of you at some point, let's say in 2020, have felt financial pressure at one point or another? I'm just going to ask you, if you have, to raise your hand. Be bold. Now I'm going to ask you to do the thing we're never supposed to do. Keep your hands up. Everybody keep their hands up. Now I just want you to look around. I know this is weird, but seriously, and see who's in that camp with you. I thought about bringing my whiteboard up here, and I thought we'd write names But my point in doing that would be to go, this person's 30, they're a doctor, they feel financial pressure. This woman's a single mom, she feels financial pressure. This kid's 13, he feels financial pressure. This woman is a millionaire, she feels financial pressure. Because I wonder if part of what we have to allow as we get into this is financial pressures at some point the norm. And while we can budget and plan and do things to protect ourselves from it, what if we do well to say, at some point, that's going to be reality? My struggles with anxiety are well documented, and I've been listening recently to this guy. If you're a student of this stuff, there's a guy, he's a British therapist. He's got a new podcast and a new book out called The Panic Pod. It's been wildly helpful to me. I wish I'd have found it a few weeks ago. But one of the things that he says in his podcast is that one of the telltale signs of a person with an anxiety disorder, and he defines disorder as just something that you experience regularly, but he says that one of the telltale signs of someone who has that issue is this statement, if I do X, then I can avoid these feelings. Because his point is, those of us who struggle with anxiety, one of our unhealthy beliefs is we think that there's certain things that if we do them, we'll never have that feeling again. Or if we don't do them, we'll never have that feeling again. And it almost becomes superstition sometimes, right? If I never drink alcohol again, if I never drink caffeine again, if I stand on my head 3 times when I get out of bed, we do these things and it's all in the name of avoiding the feeling. His point is that the proper response is what he calls acceptance. That you just have to acknowledge you will feel that again. And then you develop strategies around how you'll respond when you do. I use that as a parallel to say, I wonder if, despite the hard work of someone like Ramsey, despite what some people would call the biblical wisdom around money, despite any of the planning that someone might do, I wonder if it's healthy to just recognize, it's inevitable. Several years ago, I had lunch with one of those financial planner guys, retirement people, and I've had interactions with some of those people and absolutely loved it, and I left this particular interaction convinced that in the next 6 days, my family was going to starve to death and I was going to be living in a box. It was really, really uncomfortable. And I called my friend who I currently use as a financial advisor, and I was like, dude, I'm not ready for retirement. I was just going through this thing, and he's like, Adam, get up, go to work the plan. When you turn 50, we'll reevaluate, because lots can happen between now and then. So I wonder if part of the wisdom is to find a tension between no plan and hyper-fixated on the plan. And this is where Scott McKnight, who's this New Testament scholar, that he's written this new book called Pastor Paul that I've actually really grown to appreciate. He makes a few observations in there that I thought might just be a great jumping off point for this conversation that we're calling Poor Choices. I'm going to turn them into questions, but he asks 3 questions. And the first one is, what do you believe about work? Now, let me just say before I say anything else, I am the most politically ignorant person on the planet. So I understand that embedded in this question is a whole political conversation that if we're not careful, we split the room in half, and I love that we're a room that's 50-50 on so many of these issues. So let me just say, when I hang out with my super progressive friends and they start talking about things like welfare and stuff, I'm like, yeah. And then when I hang out with my conservative friends and they start talking about it, I'm like, yeah. So I just want to say, I don't have an agenda in this other than to look at a pretty basic principle, and it's ask this question: what do you believe about work? Because listen to what Paul says. And this, again, I think if the goal is you're never going to not feel the feeling, just have a plan for when you do, maybe this is a great place to start. Paul says this: now we command you, beloved, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, to keep away from believers who are living in idleness and not according to the tradition they received from us. So this is that, I'm not trying to say anything. In fact, if anything, what I'm doing is indicting my own way of making a living, because the way I make a living is different than the way Paul did, because Paul also did stuff like what myself and the staff do, but Paul didn't actually take a salary from it. Just being honest. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us. We were not idle when we were with you, and we did not eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with toil and labor we worked night and day so that we might not burden any of you. So there you go. There's my resignation verse right there. Then he says this, here's my out. This is not because we did not have the right, but in order to give you an example to imitate. For even when we were with you, we gave you this command: anyone unwilling to work should not eat. But here's the point I really want to drill down on. For we hear that some of you are living in idleness, mere busybodies, not doing any work. Now such persons we command and exhort in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Brothers and sisters, do not be weary in doing what is right. What do you believe about work? See, I wonder if part of the way we respond to financial pressure is just to go like, here's what I can do. I can get up and I can go to work tomorrow and I can make a wage. And let me just say, I recognize that for some of you, your work isn't get up and make a wage. You have this, for many, what is a very thankless job. I mean, it's thankful, but thankless. Like, you're a stay-at-home parent. And can I just say, like, the last thing I want to do is in any way create some voice of shame that in any way invalidates what you're doing. I understand that especially in Christian culture, it's often celebrated as the ideal, and for some people that is, but for you, it's probably and quite likely an act of sacrifice. So if you're a stay-at-home parent, please don't hear me offering commentary. I think you have the hardest job of all of us. But the point still stands. What if we do well to just recognize, well, here's what I can do. I can get up and I can go to work. Which leads to the second question of, okay, so what do you believe about providing for your family? And here again, Paul says to Timothy, to me it's just, even though they lived in such a different economy than ours and such a different way of life, it's interesting to me how these fundamentals he breaks down. Paul says this, and whoever does not provide for relatives, and especially for family members, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So you get up and you work. I know I'm stating the obvious here, but it's building towards something. And you get up and you work because you believe that it's your job to provide for your family. But I think what makes the New Testament, and especially the way of Jesus, unique is this third question. And this question has to do with, like, what do you believe about using some of what you have to bless others? This is where the generosity question happens, right? Like, this is where the proverbial rubber meets the road. In Galatians, listen to this. Paul says this, so let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at a harvest time if we do not give up. Interesting that Greek scholars would say that this has everything to do with what they would call alms. This has to do with charity. This doesn't actually have to do with, like, splitting trees for firewood. I mean, I suppose that's maybe a technicality because that is providing for people. But this is like literally almsgiving is what Paul is talking about here. It's not like, hey, be a good person. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially for those of the family of faith. I wonder if it's just good to be reminded that you made this decision at some point that you're going to get up and you're going to go to work and you're going to provide for your family, and you're going to do that because God made you to work, and you get the opportunity to also serve others. I love the way Paul says it in Ephesians. He says, it's pretty blunt, but it's interesting, like, when you think about, like, why is it not good to be a thief? Paul actually, I think, has a different rationale for that than we might think. Thieves must give up stealing rather let them labor and work honestly with their own hands. Why? Because it's morally right. Well, that's actually not what he says. So as to have something to share with the needy. What do you believe about setting aside something for others? I was talking to a friend, actually an old mentor who I have tremendous respect for, here about a month ago, and he referenced a particular sermon from a church that I'm aware of that he called the best sermon on tithing that he'd ever heard. Now, I'm a professional plagiarist, and I'm not very creative when it comes to money, so I'm like, man, I've got to go listen to that sermon because I got a series coming up, and I'm going to steal that sermon. So I downloaded it. I was at the gym a few Mondays ago. I was listening to it, and it was a really, really, really good sermon. And I'm going, yep, using this. But by the end, there was this refrain that he used that caused me to go like, I can't do it. And I guess I want to be careful because I have respect for him in this place and even what he was saying, but I couldn't sign off on this because here was the thing he said over and over and over. And it started by him doing this. He grabbed a Sharpie, you could tell, and there was a whiteboard on the stage, and he said, here's God's plan for your money. And he wrote 80, 10, 10. Live on 80, save 10, give 10. Now, let me first say, I think it's a genius plan. I think it's a wise plan. It's a plan that my wife and I signed up for in our early 20s, and I think to shrink the 80 and grow the other 2 is even more wise. But here's what I can't sign off on. Here's God's plan. Not that I don't think it's wise, not that I don't think it's a great American church plan, but if we're calling it God's plan, meaning we can open up and Paul says to do it, I'm not there. I don't, frankly, I don't see it. And I think I'm maybe splitting hairs, but it's so important to me that you have confidence in the text that I think part of the ways that I can make sure that you do is to not make claims that aren't there. But here's the claim that I think is there. And this is Scott McKnight's phrase, not mine. He calls it cruciform proportionality. It's a big word, big phrase, I get. Cruciform is, we did a series on this a couple Easters ago. Cruciform is a way of looking at the cross that kind of moves beyond a transactional, here's your ticket into heaven. Cruciform suggests that Jesus didn't suffer so you don't have to. Jesus suffered so that you would know how to. Cruciform is like our life is supposed to take on Christ's shape. But I love the phrase that he put together, cruciform proportionality. Listen, I think 80-10-10 is genius, and you'll be all the better for it if you sign up for it. I just don't want to call it God's plan. What I think is God's plan is cruciform proportionality, and I don't think that just applies to our money, and I don't think you think that either. It's our time and our resource, and it begs the question, what do you believe about that? So you get up, you go to work, you plan for the future, and is there an and? Like that, you have to pay your fee and make your decision. I'm just telling you, the legacy of this place is built upon people who you've gone like, yep. And I think part of what creates that impulse is this, and we'll end on this. In Psalm 136, I think, and maybe this is unique to me because I am a control freak with anxiety, I don't think there's anything as terrifying in the world as the future. Like, I think more terrifying than Corona is the future. In fact, I think what's making Corona terrifying is the future. Listen to what the psalmist does with the future here. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the God of gods, for his steadfast love endures forever. Oh, give thanks to the Lord of lords, for his steadfast love endures forever. In fact, I want to read the first part. I thought it might just be fun for you guys to echo that refrain. We're going to read the next stanza here. Who alone does great wonders. Who by understanding made the heavens. Who spread out the earth on the waters. Who made the great lights. The sun to rule over the day. The moon and the stars to rule over the night. And it continues. But what is the psalmist doing here? We might call it psychologically. What's he inviting you into? Isn't what he's doing is recognizing when we look to the future, that's blurry, it's unclear, we can't see it. But what can we see? We can see into the past. And so we don't look to the future by looking purely at the future. That's anxiety. That's the definition of anxiety. That's the what ifs. What's the rescue that he's offering? We look to the future by looking through the lens of the past. And when we look to the past, it's not that we don't see times that were difficult or scary or tumultuous and also joyful and awesome and happy. But what's the important thing about the past? The Hebrew word here is hesed, the hesed love of God. We don't have a good equivalent for it. That's what this phrase is trying to do. It's a God who is, his fidelity, the confidence you can have that this God will be faithful, it's there. I wonder if part of what generosity does is as we look to the future and we worry and we catastrophize and we see all the potentialities, it's a way of, but he's been faithful. And so I don't have to control my financial future. I can get up, I can go to work, I can provide for my family, I can provide for others, and I can trust that the God who made sure I had something to eat in college and the God who made sure I could sign my kids up for their sports and the God who was there when my car blew up, that God will be faithful. So I'd like to pray for you. God, Lord, my prayer in this season and for this morning is, Lord, this room, we could write volume and volume and volume about the ways that you've shown up and proven faithful to us in our lives, and especially in our financial lives. And many of us, God, have developed impulses from that remind us that it's a great personal discipline to make sure that some of our time and some of our treasure and some of our talent is set aside for others. And frankly, God, it's not just even about what it does for them, but it's about what it does to our own soul. So God, I pray for just these next couple weeks that you would remind us of stories, that you would bring a confidence to the way we breathe, that as we look to our future, and especially as it relates to our finances, and we think about healthcare and college and the myriad other things that lie out there, that we would find confidence in the fact that your steadfast love endures forever. Amen.
If you would like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us at narratechurch.org or look us up on Facebook and Instagram.